Well, good morning, everybody. I thought I would share with you a little bit of the view that I get to enjoy every day. And that is that is the Caribbean Sea. So let me now take you into my studio, and we're gonna get to making one of the lamps that I made and I featured in my last kiln opening video. And I'm going to be making some this morning, so I thought, well, why not share the process with you if anybody's inclined to make it. I would say it's not a beginner piece, it's not an advanced piece, it's kind of intermediate advanced because I'm making them very tall. So the first time somebody asked me to make something that was 12 inches tall, I ended up throwing two 6-inch pieces and putting them together because I said, there's no way I can make anything 12 inches tall. Well, my skill level has improved exponentially since then, and I can make the tall pieces. So I'm going to share with you, this is the piece we're going to make. And I won't be doing the carving or anything today because I'm just simply making the form, and then when I trim, I will do the carving tomorrow. So I just wanted to share this with you and show you how I make it. I also, when I make one of these, I make a saucer and I measure the bottom, and then when I do my saucer, I make sure that this will fit inside the saucer. I make them together at the same time, so they're made out of the same clay and they will shrink at the same rate. So this is what we're making. This is 12 inches tall, and it is hollow form. It is 6 inches wide. So what I'm going to end up making is about 3.5 inches tall, 13.5 inches tall by about 6 3/4 inches wide. That's what the form, that's the size I'm shooting for today. And I can do that in two ways. I can use, so my equipment is dirty and I'm sorry, but I use a shrink rule, which is a 12-inch shrink rule. Or I can use just a regular rule and do the measurements, like I said, 13.5 by 6 3/4. But I find it easier just to use the shrink rule. If you don't have one, get one. So let me put my camera down to table level, and I'm going to show you how I make this. So let me just, I'm just going to make some adjustments because I normally, I want to make sure I can fit in all of the, sorry everybody, I just want to make sure I can fit in all of the piece when I make it. Yeah, okay. Okay, we'll leave it at that. So here I have my sponge, my wooden tool. I did try and clean it off a little bit, but that little bit of leftover clay on it isn't going to affect anything, because really what I'm worried about is the edge of my tool, and that is clean. And I have 5 pounds, 5 ounces of clay, which will probably be too much because when I trim them, I trim off quite a bit. So I've actually lessened the amount of clay that I used from the one that I showed you, and I should be okay. But for those of you who are a more advanced potter than I am, 5 pounds will be enough. So let's get underway. I have a bat here. I love this Sin Tools bat system that my family gave me last year for Christmas, and it works really well. But and I would probably use it, but I'm going to be taking the rim beyond the size of this is only a little 6-inch insert, and these ones that are made from masonite are 9 inches. So it suits me better to use just a regular bat. We all know what they are. And a lot of my forms now I make on bats, even my mugs, even just letting them sit on the bat for about an hour, just so that when I go to take the form off the bat, I don't alter its shape and take it out of round. Well, because most of my pieces are round. So I've just cleaned off the bat, and I'm going to plunk my lump of clay down. Now, as you can see right here in the corner, I have a strong arm. Let me see if I think I've got this kind of tilted funny. I've got a strong arm, but I'm going to center this just using my brute strength. So what I start out by doing is just slap centering my clay, but it also helps to secure the clay onto the bat because I want to make sure I have a really good seal. And I do. So I have my water bucket and my slop bucket. And I just make sure that I lubricate the clay and my hand. And like I told you, I think in the last video where, oh God, I can't even remember what it was that I made. Oh yes, I made the utility crocks. First thing I'm going to do is put a seal here in the bottom to make sure that no water gets underneath my clay. So that's the first thing you want to do when you're centering a piece of clay. The way I do it is I just kind of get in there, and I'm already starting to kind of center it, but I just kind of slide my hands down the clay, and then I go to the bottom and I use my little finger here, and you can see that I'm starting to seal the bottom of this clay. And now I've got a really good seal. No water is going to go in there and nothing is going to move this clay other than my hands. So now what I'm going to do is I lock my elbow into my hip, and this becomes the tool that I'm using. And this hand is going to come in at the opposite direction, and I'm just going to bring my hands together. I used to do it like this, and I found that especially with large pieces of clay, I wouldn't center it as easily, even though I have good control, because I would just press in, and then you can see that my hands are just dirty here, and that's where the pressure point is. Just put a piece of dry clay on there. Let me get it off. Okay. So but now what I do, because I have a larger piece of clay, I'm going to lock my elbow into my hip. This becomes a constant, and this becomes the variable, and I just push them in together, and then I slowly raise my hands up, and my clay starts to center. And of course, because I'm pressing, it can only go up. Then I have a lot of evenness here at the top. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the side of my hand and I'm going to press it in, and you can see how it just starts to cone that in. And then I don't get that dreaded hole at the top of my cone. Then what I do now is lubricate my hand and the clay again, lock in my elbow, and I just go up a second time. And what I'm concentrating on is not the clay. I'm actually concentrating on my hands, and I'm lifting them straight. Well, sorry, I've just taken my hands out of the view. I've lifted my hands straight up, and now you can see that this is almost centered. I'm going to push this forward with my hands, and then I'm just going to, the force that I'm using is on this part of my hand now. And I'm just going to press down and bring that, and it just magically comes into center. Again, my elbow is locked into my hip, because as you remember in your early days of throwing pottery, the clay moved your hands. So if the clay was off center, your hands were bouncing all over the place. And as your skill level improves, and so does your psychological attitude towards throwing pottery, is that you learn that your hands move the clay. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to do this again. I'm going to do it a second time. Again, I'm just going to push in with the heels of my hands, which are opposite each other, and I'm just going to bring this up. And I've got a little hole in the middle, so I'm going to get rid of that by making that pointed top. Got rid of it. And then I'll just bring my hands back up and finish. Now I didn't take it quite as tall because my clay is nicely centered. If it wasn't as centered and it was still kind of really off, I would probably do this 3 times. But again, as your skill level improves, you feel it. Well, even as a novice or a beginner potter, you feel when your clay is off center. You just don't know how to fix it very well. But as an advanced potter or an intermediate potter, you begin to figure those things out. So now what I'm doing is I'm making my pancake. You can see that my clay is pretty centered. Now I need to make this, like I said, 6 3/4 inches wide, and at the base it's going to curve in. It's going to belly out in the middle. It's going to curve at the top and then come to the top. Yeah, it's going to flare out at the top. So what I need to do is, using my calipers, my lovely dirty calipers, I'm going to take my shrink rule and I'm going to measure about 5 3/4. I think I'm just going to, it looks best when it's around 5 3/4 or 6 inches wide. So I've measured it on my rule, and then I can turn the caliper around. I can put it like this and eyeball where the center is, and you can see that I have about a finger's width, which is probably 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch more to move it out. That's going to happen probably as I widen the pot, or as I make the well in the middle and pull it out. It's going to expand to the outside. So let's just see. I'm going to leave it at that. So right now, as I said, it's not as wide as I need it to be, but I'm going to show you. I don't need to take it any wider. I'm going to make a little hole, and I always do this with every pot, whether I'm using 1 pound, 10 pounds. Well, I've never made anything 10 pounds. I think 6.5 or 7 pounds is the largest I've ever gone. But I use my knuckle, and you can easily feel when you're in center. And then I just push down with my knuckle, and I keep feeling my hand, and it's really nicely centered. And that starts the well of my pot. Now, because I don't have a floor, this is a hollow form, I am going to take my hand all the way to the bat. Normally I would leave 3/8 inch at the bottom for the base of my pot, but this time I'm not. So now what I do is I use this part of my finger, and it's a straight line. You can see that it's straight. And so when I go down, I make a well that is in this shape. It's coned down into the center, as opposed to going straight down, because that makes it difficult to widen the pot when you want to make the interior width. So I'm just going to go down, and this finger now becomes my tool. This finger now becomes my pressure point. And I'm just going to, now remember, this is my stability. My thumb on this hand, are my two hands connected with stability. My elbow is on my leg. My other arm is kind of tucked into the side of my body. So my body is supporting this arm, my leg is supporting this elbow, and whatever. So it's support all the way around, because if your hands are free like that, the clay is going to push them all over the place. Once you start to stabilize and put force down, then you control the clay. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to push down and make the well to the bottom to the bottom. Yes, to the bottom, to the bat is really what I meant to say. Now, as my center is narrowing out a little bit, so I'm just going to push it open a little bit more and get back in there and just continue down until I reach the bat. Now, I've just done what I said I wasn't going to do, and I kind of made a little straight down cone. Now I can just go in there and open it up a little bit. Okay, so now I've got my hole, and it's all the way, you can't see it, but it's all the way to the bat. And I'm going to go in, and I use my fingers. Really, these two fingers are my pulling fingers, and I'm going to curve them in, and all I'm going to do now is leave my hand like this in this position and just draw my hand back. And I just go like that. I keep this my tool. I create my tool, so I start with my hands against the clay, and then I just cup my hands in. The clay, it's going to move the clay, and then I just slide my hand back, keeping that shape and keeping it very stiff, and it will open up the bottom of my clay. Okay, so now I'm curling my fingers under, and now I'm going to start to draw my hand back, keeping that shape. Okay, it's starting to open. I've opened it up now about 4 inches. Now I've got a bit of a big curve on the inside here. So I'm actually going to take care of that right now. What I'm going to do is cut my fingers under, and then I'm just going to draw them up like I'm evening out the walls of my pot. Okay? So now you can see what has happened on the inside of the pot. I now have a straighter wall. So I'm going to go back in there, and again, I need to pull it out some more. And in a single move, again, I'm just going to move my hands up the pot. Hard to believe this is going to come to 13 inches, but it should. Because right now I'm at about 4.5, 5 inches. Okay. So this is where now I get in with my sponge. So let's take a caliper measurement. You remember how much extra room I had? Now I've taken it, I can't even get my calipers in there. So I pushed that out probably a good 1.5 inches, this outer edge. So now what I'm going to have to do is, when I'm thinning out my walls, instead of just taking pressure from the inside and pushing out, I'm actually going to have to take from the outside and push in. And that will actually strengthen my pot. So I take my sponge in my water and I lubricate the sides. If there's any dry spot in there, you're going to catch it, and you're going to take your pot and move your pot off center. Okay? So the first thing I'm going to do right now is I'm going to just kind of cone this in. I want it to go in, so I'm just applying equal pressure with my hands. Okay? Because I'm taking this tall, the thinner I can have this here, because I can stretch the clay out to the sizes that I want. It's difficult to bring it back in. Okay, so let's make sure we're well lubricated. Okay, so I got a little bit of a hump here. Right now, all I want to do is I want to even out the sides of the clay, because there's still uneven thickness between the bottom, the bulge that I have right here, and the part that I have up here at the top. But I know that I've got the bottom of my pot a little too wide, so what I'm actually going to do is 2 moves in one. I'm going to thin my base, not thin my base, shrink, make it not as wide. And this time I'm going to use my finger, and what I'm using is my middle finger, and I'm going to push it in a little bit. And then I'm just going to meet it with my finger on the inside, and I'm just going to hold them steady, and I'm just going to bring my hands up slowly. And all I'm doing here is just thinning out the walls, evening out the walls of my pot. And then when I get to the top, I take my finger on the side of my finger and I press it down. And I compress the rim. Now we have a nice base to start with. So let me get my calipers out again and see how we're doing on the width. Okay, I need to take it in just a little bit more. So now I'm doing the first pull to get the height into my pot. My walls are even thickness. I can run my hand up and down and feel that they're really pretty even. So I'm really happy with that. So now I'm going to take my finger and I'm just going to kind of tuck it under, because I want to get this little bit here. And I want to push it in. Okay, I get my hands so they're touching. My inside hand. I'll explain it in the next one. But watch the height of the pot go up as I move my hands. Again, I'm concentrating on my hands and not the pot. The clay is just in the way of my hands. I learned that in golf when my golf teacher, I had, when I was a little bit younger, an extremely good golf swing. And my teacher just told me that the golf ball is in the way of your swing. So the thing to work on is don't concentrate on the golf ball, concentrate on your swing. So I translate that into my pottery, and I don't concentrate on the clay. I concentrate on what my hands are doing. The clay is just in the way. So now you can see that I've got the base almost to the size that I want. I like the base of this pot to be the same width as the height of my pot. Okay? Now, how are we doing in inches? Okay, right now I'm at 8.5 inches. So I need to get this pot up quite a bit more. Now, when I do this, I'm going to try and bring my pot in. In fact, I might even do that now. Because of the curvature of what this is going to look like, let me show you again with the original. Here is that you have this curve here. So what I'm going to try and do is bring my clay in to match that, and then I can always expand it once I get my height and to here. So this is what I'm working on now, is to control this thickness. So I can do that one of two ways. I can do it throwing, or what I can do is I can collar it in. So I take it's almost too big to do the 6.1. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my hands, they're opposite each other. I'm letting the clay touch all of this, and my thumbs, as much as my thumbs as I can. And I'm just going to apply even pressure, and you'll just see this piece come in. And then once I get it to the desired thickness, all I do now again is I concentrate on my hands, and I just bring my hands up to my face. My face is right over the center of this pot. When I get to the rim, I just go very, very slowly and carefully. So now I've brought this pot in quite a bit. And when you bring it in fact, it thickens the walls a bit. All right, so now as I move up into do the second pull, remember this was just my first pull. What you might have thought was my first pull, remember, was just evening out the thickness of my pot, but I was able to get a little bit of height in it at the same time. So now my hand goes straight down into the bottom. What I'm going to do is I'm going to match where my fingers are. I'm going to press in a little bit with my outside hand, and I'm going to raise my inside hand. And the two fingers are going to move up like this. And this is where you see the bulge. You will see a bulge. And that's caused by my inside hand pushing the clay out, and then my outside hand follows behind and almost compresses it and pushes it back in. But that's how I'm able to thin out the walls evenly. And again, I concentrate just on my hands and what my hands are doing. So now I'm pressing in a little bit, pushing out. Now you can see where the bulge has already started. And now I'm just going to carry that bulge up the pot. And as I do, you're going to see the height of my pot grow. And I just go at a very steady pace. When I get up towards the rim, I kind of stop. And now I change the position of my hands, because now my hands can touch each other. I put my fingers back where they were before, and then I continue that pull. But now I've got a little more stability in the pot because my hands are connected and touching. Now I don't mind the flare that I'm getting at the top, because there's going to be a flare in the pot anyway. Okay, so how are we doing? We're still in the picture, okay? All right, so now I said I was 8.5 inches. So that pull, I'm now at 12.5 inches. So that pull not only thinned out my walls, thinned out and started to work on the shape, it also made my pot grow 4 inches. So I'm going to do one more pull, and in this pull I'm going to Again, I need to thin it out because I need to bring up my pot another at least inch and a bit. And I can feel a lot of clay down here in the bottom, so this is where I'm going to bring the clay from. So again, I'm going to push out at the bottom. You can see that I'm starting to make that little lump. I'm going to carry that up, and this is where now I can also start to shape the pot. So I'm going in a little bit because my pot goes in, and then I'm going out a little bit in the middle to emulate the shape. And this is where I'm pushing with my inside hand. It's just slight. Not a lot. And then I'm going to now put a little bit of extra pressure on the outside hand and start to bring that clay in to make that curve that I'm going to have. Ooh, I'm just going to make the picture or the screen, I think. Yep, just about done. So now you can start to see a little bit of the shape that I'm going to do. Okay, so what am I now? I'm at actually 14 inches. So that pull took it up 1.5 inches. But because I'm going to widen out my clay a little bit, I'm going to lose some of that height, which is good. And remember, I want to have my top. So right now my top is at 5 3/4, and I want it at, what did I say, 6? I wanted it at 6 3/4. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to flare out the top. So I start about here, pushing out, and now I'm going to flare the rim. I'm doing this very slowly. I don't want to knock my pot off center. And when I get to the top, I leave my hand there for a couple of revolutions just to make sure that it's centered and nice. Okay, I can measure this. So now I'm at 6.5, and I still want to take it out of just a little bit more. But there's nothing written in stone. It doesn't have to be exactly 6. It's what my goal is. But if it ends up being 5 3/4 inches wide at the top, it doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is that if I'm making a pear, which I often do, then you want to be sure that you take precise measurements because you do want the second one to match up with the first. Okay, so now I like how this is going. So last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my rib and I'm going to create my curve at the bottom. Carefully put my hand down in the middle. Create the curve at the bottom. So I'm pressing with my hand on the inside up against the rib, and I follow the shape of the rib, but I can only go so far. Turn the rib over, and now my inside hand is pushing out. You can see my top is going off center, but I'm not really worried about that right now. I'll get it back. Okay, so now you can see how the shape is defining itself. And at the end of the day, if there is a little wobble at the pot, in the pot, it's not the end of the world, because when the pot is sitting still on the table or whatever, wherever you've decided to put it, it doesn't wobble. And then I'm going to go and I'm going to take the same curve that I used down here, I'm going to do up here. So I'm going to start it at about here and just move clay. Get that nice little curve. You can see how I've got that wobble, taken that wobble out. Okay. So that's pretty much it. What I'm going to do now is go on the inside. I think I want to expand it out just a little bit more. So I'm taking my rib down to about here, and I'm very carefully applying a little bit of pressure can see a little bit of a bulge right there. And I'm going to slowly go up to make sure that my pot goes around at least once or twice. This is a very slow process because you don't want to knock your pot off center. And then I'm just going to release the pressure as I get to the top. And you saw, if you saw it and were watching over here, you could see how I expanded the piece. Now I'm going to go in and just push out a little bit more here, down here. And that's it. I can feel a little bit of unevenness, so I'm just going to run my rib over that, and you can see how my pot has beautifully come back into center. And I'm not going to do anything more. I don't want to ruin it. This is turned out really, really well. I just used the corner of this rib and I just defined the base. Okay. And the last thing I do is I take my little chamois and I just run it over the top. Again, it compresses the top. I go around at least 4 or 5 times to make sure that my pot is on center. And there you have it. Right. So that becomes this. What I'm going to do is, let me just put this back up because I've finished making the pot. There you go, you can see it all in its glory. So it is, as a finished piece, it is 13.5 inches tall, and it is 6 3/4 inches wide. So if I want to make a mate to this, I have to remember that it's 13.5 by 6 3/4, and then I'll be able to get a second one. I do like to do them in pairs. I don't necessarily sell them in pairs, but I like to make them in pairs because if people are going to use them as a table decoration, then they get the two pieces that are matching. Now what I'm going to do is, well, let me just get a little bit of the moisture out of the inside. You can see the little bit of sludge that I got off the bottom on the inside. Alrighty. So my next step now is just to take this off. I'm not going to risk it by taking it off the bat. I'm going to leave it off the bat. I'll take off the bat and I'll use a new bat for the next piece that I make. I just wiggle my bat. This is a bat. I don't know what it's called. It's a ZM tool. ZM, XIEM, can you see it? There it is there, ZM tools. And it's just their bat lifter, best tool I got. I just go in, pardon me, excuse me, and I just kind of wiggle that under, and all I do is lift the bat over and just catch it up onto the bat pin. And that way I'll be able to get my fingers in and pick this up. And there you have it. Show you. Right. Then I'll just put it aside. So I hope that was an informative video for anybody who is wishing to try my lamps. Now traditionally I made them about 5 inches wide and maybe about 9, maybe 10 inches tall. And I used 3 pounds, 3 ounces of clay for that. I really like the bigger one. I can, if you give me 1 second. this is what I used to make, and this is what the new one is. So you can see that it's considerably larger. And my husband and I both agree that we like the larger one. So I think I'm going to maybe abandon this size and not make them that size anymore unless somebody specifically asks for a smaller one. But I really do like the larger piece. And how I got it white in the middle is I glazed the outside. I put wax on it over the entire surface. This is my mark wax on. And I just waxed over the entire surface, and then I dipped it in Opulence Ultra White to get the white on the inside. Because it has holes, you can't dip it or pour it in to make a solid inside a different color, because of course the clay is just going to run out the holes. So there you go. I want to thank you very much for joining me. It was an impromptu decision to make this video this morning, but for anybody who's wants to attempt to try to make this lamp or lantern, and I'm calling it a lantern. Oh dear, it's only 10 o'clock in the morning. Oh God, I got a long day ahead of me. Anyway, thank you very much for joining me. If you like this video, please hit the like button. If you wish to comment, I love hearing what you have to say. It's always positive, reinforcing the joy that I have in making pots and sharing my experiences with you. I'm not a trained potter. I'm not a master potter. I'm none of that. I'm just a woman who loves to throw pots. So thanks for joining me today. I wish you all the best. And today is Thanksgiving Day for the American Society, the American friends that are watching my YouTube channel today. Happy belated Thanksgiving if you catch this later. So thanks again. Enjoy your day. Have a wonderful time and just enjoy life. Thanks for joining me today. Bye-bye.